Welcome to the Krueg Show, Niners Nation edition. Happy Thursday to everybody. Kyle Posey stopping by in his regular spot as he always does. What's going on, Kyle? How's your Thursday afternoon going?
It feels like time is going by at a snail's pace right now with no football, man. I'm not sure what to do. I love watching baseball, but baseball's I don't know, it's not doing it for me. And I'm a Braves fan too, and they're winning, so not bad though. Can't complain. I mean, think about it. If that's my biggest complaint, like where's football? I feel like I'm doing all right. How about you?
Yeah, it's it's been a busy day today, but I will say this, I do think that we are in that window where people are just making stuff up, it's like, the NFL schedule. And I was talking to my wife about this and she's like, isn't it just like a seasonal sport? And I'm like, no, actually the NFL goes from, let's say it begins at training camp in July, and then you've got, preseason, and then you get the regular season, and then the Super Bowl is if you go to the playoffs, if your team's in the Super Bowl, I mean, you're talking about first week in February. Then there's the combine, then there's free agency, then there's the draft, and there's just constant topics all the way through the draft. And then after you hit the draft, there's a couple of mini camps, but I would say it kind of quiets down like first week in May. And then it's kind of dormant between first week in May and let's say middle of July when camp gets rolling. That is the off season in the NFL. The truly dormant period is post-draft, pre-training camp. And that's really only a couple months. So It's kind of a 10-month-a-year deal.
Which no other sport can say that. I feel like the difference between football and basketball, baseball, hockey, there are so many games in those other sports, whereas football, once August 1 hits, like once these guys are in training camp, it's full go for the next 10 months, man. You talked about it, just through free agency, through the draft, there's always something to talk about. But now is that period where we're just reaching for topics for sure.
Yeah. Let's get to the big story of the day, which are the big story of the week in the NFL, and that was Baker Mayfield ultimately was traded from the Browns to the Panthers. And a lot of people feel like that eliminates all the quarterback possibilities as far as the starting position. I don't know that is indeed the case. What's your thought on it? It seems like do we have any now, clarification in any way after seeing that trade on any aspect of what may be coming next for Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers?
I think Deshaun Watson's the next domino to fall, right? We got to figure out how hard the league's going to come down on him suspension wise. Will it be as little as 6 to 8 games? Because if that's the case, are they really going to go out and pay Jimmy the money or even trade for Jimmy? But if it's serious and then they're talking closer to 12, 14 to full season, if that's the case, and I think the Browns might get a little bit desperate, because the last thing they want to do with that roster that they have is go into the season with Jacoby Brissett and no other quarterback on the roster as a starter. And for as much as people talk down about Jimmy, I would say that he's clearly an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett, and I would say he's better than Baker Mayfield. So I think there's still a holding pattern. We have to see what happens with Watson, but who knows? We haven't heard anything new from the Jimmy aspect. We don't even know if he's throwing yet. We don't know if he's privately throwing for teams. If there are teams quietly calling John Lynch in the front office to see, hey, what are you going to do? Are you going to hold on to him? Are you going to release him? Like, what's your move here? So I guess my question to you is, what do you think happens? Because it could happen tomorrow. It could happen 2 weeks from now. Like, who knows when the Jimmy domino falls.
Well, I think there's the thing I've been looking at is what teams can actually afford him pre-renegotiation. And as of 10 days ago, though, there was 2 of them. Carolina was one. Now they're off the board. The Browns were the other.
Yep.
So I think a trade to the Browns is going to happen. I think that is going to be Jimmy's next home. I think it makes sense. He's a Midwestern guy, and I think without Watson, maybe Watson could be suspended for a year or maybe more than a year. Who knows? And I think they have too much. Like Jacoby Brissett's not a terrible quarterback, but then you're one hit away from Joshua Dobbs having to carry the entire franchise. And this is a franchise, the Browns, that have a lot of they've got a lot of talent on their roster. They're pretty deep at wide receiver. They brought in Amari Cooper, David Bell in the draft, invested a lot of money in their O-line. They got a lot of running backs: Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Ernest Johnson, Jerome Ford, the rookie. They got a big time defensive line with Clowney and Garrett and Jordan Elliott. They're fast linebacker, and they're loaded in the secondary. So I look at the Browns as they're a borderline Super Bowl contender if they can find an answer at quarterback. That's a huge if, but if I'm them, there's no way I'm going into this year and just kind of saying, I'll just go with Brissett and Dobbs and cross my fingers. No, we're post-draft. I mean, if you were going into the draft and your quarterbacks were Brissett and Dobbs and you were looking at options, that'd be one thing. The draft's come and gone. And, the free agency's come and gone. The moves have been made. If you don't have Watson and you're staring at a full year of Brissett and Dobbs, how do you not trade for Jimmy? The question I would have for you coming back is, what's your price tag if you're John Lynch and the Browns come calling?
Yeah, and real quick, some of the talking points, some of the counterpoints would be, why would the Browns trade for Jimmy if they know the 49ers are going to release him? And my counter to that would be, I'm not giving any other team a chance. Like, knowing you talked about all the talent on the roster, we're talking about Myles Garrett Prime that just gave $100 million to Denzel Ward, their cornerbacks. And they're in a prime position to win. So just giving a chance of any other team, like there's going to be, I'm sure there are wild card teams that we're not even thinking of that are interested in Jimmy, whether it's as a backup, as a starter, as a platoon, whatever it may be. But that's why the Browns I agree with you, they will make a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. But I don't think the price tag is going to be to John Lynch's liking. I think you remember this way back when the offseason started. There were rumors floating around that Jimmy would go as high as the 11th overall pick for the Commanders. Obviously, that was a pipe dream at the time. Now, I think it's going to turn into something like what Baker went for, a conditional pick. He might even have to pay some of his salary to move him. I will say, though, if it does get to that, if it gets to a point where the 49ers do have to pay a part of Jimmy's salary, that is going to work out. That'll be a benefit for them because they can even get a higher pick. So they might end up paying money, but be able to turn that into like a fourth or a third if that is the case. But my answer to you would probably be realistically a fourth round pick. What do you think?
Probably. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Fourth round pick, maybe a fourth. It could be a third, something like that. I'll tell you what I would like if I were Lynch is I'd like one of those DBs. I think, when you look at the Niners secondary, there's a lot of bodies in camp, but there's a lot of question marks back there as well. I love Greg Newsome and the nickelback. I think he'd be a phenomenal 49er. I like Greedy Williams. I like AJ Green. I like the rookie out of Mississippi State, Martin Emerson. I like Denzel Ward. There's several players in their secondary. I love Richard LeCount, the former Georgia safety, who, the 49ers, that would be nice to have another young safety. I wouldn't mind taking one of their young DBs, and plugging him in, or I'd be open-minded to obviously I'm a big fan of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I don't think the 49ers have a need at linebacker, but any athlete on defense on all three levels, whether it be up front in the secondary or at linebacker, I'd be interested in that because you can just never have enough athletes on defense. But probably you're right. You're probably looking at more of a 2023 draft pick situation. Yeah. But I do think it will happen. I do think it will be the Browns. I think we've now kind of figured out because they may be able to renegotiate along the path once you get Jimmy in the building. But I think to make this deal happen, the 49ers have allowed teams to negotiate with Jimmy an extension. That news came out, a few weeks ago, that the 49ers had allowed that access. So who knows? Maybe Don Yee has already worked something out behind the scenes with the Browns brass on some kind of an extension, and maybe his contract is not going to be as punitive if you extend it a year or two. Who knows? Maybe they're even we don't know the status of Deshaun Watson's situation. What if Watson got a year and a half? What if he was gone all this year and part of next year? Then maybe you'd want a player like Jimmy. And maybe in some ways, Jimmy's like the ideal guy since he's shown that he's mentally mature, can handle the distraction. He's won a lot of games, including playoff games. In some ways, I could see where the price tag could be higher than people think, because in a lot of ways, he's the perfect guy for what the Browns need if indeed Watson's going to be suspended for a long period of time.
He feels like an AFC North quarterback, honestly.
He does.
Think about it. So their coach, Kevin Stefanski, like, he's a Shanahan guy. He's running the same offense. So it would be a seamless transition for him to go to the Browns. How about this? Let's say Watson's suspension isn't as long as we think, and the Browns, or for whatever reason, the Browns aren't interested. What's a wild card team that could come calling for Jimmy G? Because I'm thinking East Coast, where maybe the Giants, like, they don't like what they have in Daniel Jones, and they have an up-and-coming roster. They have a totally new coaching staff, so no ties to Daniel Jones. Why wouldn't they bring in a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, who's a clear upgrade over Daniel Jones? Or stay in East Coast, the Jets, keeping it in New York, where you have the entire 49ers offensive coaching staff, obviously Robert Saleh. He's there, and we saw what Zach Wilson did last year. Without mincing words, he was not good. There's no reason to pretend that he was good. Can he get better in year two? Sure, he can. But every quarterback who played for the Jets last year was better than Zach Wilson. So it's safe to assume Jimmy Garoppolo, with the weapons that they have, Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and Garrett Wilson, who they just drafted, like, those are weapons that he would be able to, help out with. And of course, they upgraded the defense. So I think those two are sneaky, under the radar teams. What about you? Do you think there's a team that we're forgetting or that we're not mentioning that's not being brought up for Jimmy?
Well, at first I would think, Washington, but then Washington brought in Wentz. My mind went to Miami, but there's Teddy Bridgewater, sitting behind Tua. I think Miami would be can't you picture Jimmy in Miami with that tan and just, he just seems like he's perfect for Miami. Right. But I think the one that you hit on is probably the one that I would agree with, and that's the New York Giants. They do have Tyrod Taylor there, but this is a proud franchise. This is an iconic franchise that's been out of the mix for a while now. And they have invested consistently in the wide receiver core. They've got Kadarius Toney, who's a first-round pick. They signed Kenny Golladay in free agency. You still got Sterling Shepard. They used a number 2 this year on Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky. He looked phenomenal in the mini camp. So they've invested at wide receiver, and they've added Bellinger, the tight end, who I think is going to help quite a bit. They added a tackle and Evan Neal. I think that should help. They've got Barkley and Matt Breida. So, I could see Jimmy, especially, I don't know how they feel about Jones. Personally, I think Jones is a really intriguing, build back up candidate if and when he gets kicked to the curb, because he is a big kid with a ton of athleticism and, real impact speed. I would love to see the 49ers add a guy like that and see if they could rehabilitate him, once his cost is nothing,
like Trubisky and the Bills.
Yeah, because I think he's just been surrounded by a bad O-line, not a lot of a surrounding cast. They've now built up the surrounding cast, but now he's seeing ghosts, and he turns the ball over at a record rate. But man, when he takes off to run, you're talking about an impact runner, and he's got good size. He can make all the NFL throws. I just think if you surround him in a Shanahan offense with a lot of weapons, you could do a whole lot better than Daniel Jones as your number 2 to Trey Lance. What do you think?
Yeah, for Daniel Jones, I've watched enough of him to know that I don't know if the ball is going to get there or not, but in that offense, I can't imagine not giving him 15 carries a game, just because for all the reasons. Like, he is a dynamic athlete. Like, he can really run. And a lot of times he's outrunning second-level defenders and sometimes third-level defenders. So I think there's a place for him in the NFL. Probably just needs a fresh start. And what better way to do that, with the 49ers? And that doesn't mean he has to start a bunch of games. Mitch Trubisky is going to be a starting quarterback this year without having played last year. So I think that is something 49ers should definitely look into down the road.
Let's hit it. You wrote an article I thought that was kind of interesting this week on Niners Nation about JC Tretter. And a lot of people have thrown out JC Tretter as a potential free agent addition for the 49ers. He's had a lot of physical issues. It sounds like the Niners coming out of minicamp have talked up both Jake Brendel and Aaron Banks as the starters on the offensive line, Brendel at center and Banks at left guard. What do you think about Tretter and the fit? And does his injuries scare you away? What do you think ultimately is going to happen with him?
I think when you're talking about the 49ers and just injuries in general, they shouldn't let that stop them, just because before they were gassing up Brendel this offseason, when have you ever heard that name before? There was a lot of people who didn't know that he was even the backup center last year when he was active on the team. So to go from basically essentially a no-name, who, remember, he hasn't played since 2018, to starting, and not just starting, but he is in charge of all the line calls. I remember Trey Lance was talking about that this offseason, where he was saying, hey, the center is the one who's making all these calls up here. So from 2018 to not playing, and now you're protecting your prize investment on the roster, that's a little bit of a concern. So we know JC Tretter, who has not missed a start. I believe he's missed one game since 2017, and a lot of his stats are really freaking impressive too. So penalties are really good. He hasn't allowed more than 2 sacks since each season since 2017. And then he just doesn't get beaten. And when you're a veteran guy, he's probably seen everything under the sun as far as what defenses can show him from a front standpoint. And he's a smart guy. He's a Cornell grad. So I just think he would take a lot of pressure off Trey Lance, and he's going to make the person next to him better too. And I think that's something that we're ignoring. So it's not just a new center they're breaking in. They're breaking in a new left guard and possibly a new right guard too. So with that in mind, I would have no problem paying JC Tretter. And maybe the only concern would be paying him money-wise. Jimmy's still on the roster. 49ers only have about $4.8 million in cap space right now. But you can get a deal done, and that hasn't stopped any team. We've seen teams like the Rams, who are negative cap space, be able to bring in free agents. So it would be a no-brainer to me. The only concern would be his fit. At this age, a lot of veterans, do they even want to go through that whole training camp cycle? So that's something to keep an eye on. But outside of that, I wouldn't have any worries at all. And if the goal is, which is the goal, to bring in good players and to make your team better and to obviously make Trey Lance's life a lot easier, give him a veteran center. And that would probably make, just his transition to the NFL even more seamless. What do you think?
Well, I love what I'm seeing out of Jason Poe, the kid out of Mercer. I think he's got real NFL ability. So I wouldn't want to clog the middle. I'd want to find out exactly what I have in Donovan West and Jason Poe before I made that move. But yeah, if I got to the end of camp and I didn't feel great about any of the young guys, heck yeah. I mean, JC Tretter would be on a very short list of guys that I would have a ton of interest in because of all the reasons you stated. I mean, I think he is a good fit. But I saw something special in Poe, and I want to see that kind of carry out on the field. And if he's good enough to get in there and play right away, then I want to see it. I want to see them invest in a young player like that, because I think he really will pop you in the run game. He plays with a ton of leverage. He plays low. I think he's tough. I think he's athletic as hell. I think that might be a real steal. We'll find out come July. Mike Silver went on the Colin Cowherd podcast, and Ryan's going to play this for us right now. Here's a little chunk of Silver on the Colin Cowherd podcast. Ryan, we're going to hear a little discussion on Trey Lance and the potential and the concerns for arm fatigue. Listen to this, Kyle.
Yeah, it's about 2.5 minutes, and I'm not going to play the video just because I don't want to get in trouble, demonetized. All right,
gotcha.
You were sitting there nicely at SoFi Stadium watching your team with a 10-point lead in the NFC Championship game against a rival and thinking, we're going to win the Super Bowl, Jimmy. This is amazing. And now you're going, okay, so we're basically playing Russian roulette here. We are either going to be in awesome shape with this young guy eventually, and hopefully the window's still open, or we traded 3 ones for a guy who's not able to do what our team was constructed to have the quarterback do. And by the time we fix that, everyone's going to be gone. That's a scary feeling.
Well, you and I may have the same source and may not, but I've said when I saw Trey Lance play, aesthetically, it's ugly. It's not Phillip Rivers ugly, but it's not a pretty delivery. It's really rough. Secondly, what you're saying is what I'm hearing. Is that he's not his delivery is they're kind of rebuilding it. He gets arm fatigue. It's not an easy throw. He needs days off, and they're worried about his. Yep,
I've heard that
and they're,
too. Yeah.
Yep, and they're worried about his accuracy. You and I are hearing the same things because you and I know Andy Reid moved off Alex Smith, who got into the playoffs because they were at practice. They saw Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
By the way, Buffalo, even though Josh Allen struggled first year, was all in because they were at practice.
And I want to caution fans here.
I'm going to stop it there just because, it goes on for another minute and a half of decent stuff. Essentially, the other things they touch on is Mike Silver brings up the fact that, they were really stoked coming into the year about the Trey Lance packages, and they went away from that. And is that an indicator of anything? And overall, just kind of, they touched on the arm fatigue thing a little bit more. But yeah, so I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah. What do you think, Kyle? I mean, we've heard this arm fatigue thing a few weeks ago. It's interesting. I was at minicamp. I didn't see Mike Silver. I was at minicamp. I didn't see Colin Cowherd. So now, and what I did see was I saw Trey throw dimes in the red zone the second to last day of minicamp. And in the final day of minicamp, he hit 2 deep balls, receivers who didn't even break stride. I mean, it was a flat dime on the run, perfect Russell Wilson drop it in the bucket, deep ball. So I'm not saying that every pass was like that none of his passes wobbled and that everything was exactly on time and hitting guys in stride. I didn't see that. But I stood there, and I feel like I know what I'm watching. I didn't see a guy who was alarmingly inaccurate by any stretch. So how much credence do you put into that entire discussion with these nameless, faceless sources who are whispering that this kid who looks awesome is actually, there's all kinds of concerns and issues?
So there's a video.
This is like the biggest story in Ninerland, really.
It's pretty crazy. So there's a video of him throwing, and I actually sent that video to a quarterback coach who works with Trey Lance, who works with him this offseason, trained him leading up to the draft, and he said there are no issues. So that right there, okay, they don't know what they're talking about. What they were ignoring was Shanahan last year saying that Trey could have won the quarterback job had he not hurt his finger. I don't think people remember how close that battle was. It started out, so it was 90-10, 80-20 as far as the QB reps were going. And then the more that they played, the more that Trey was getting closer and closer to the point where they were splitting reps in practice. So you can't say that they weren't happy with Trey Lance as a rookie. And now, of course, if they say they're worried about his accuracy and whatnot, that's what I brought up. The whole, the quarterback coach thing. And just as you said, in minicamp, these issues don't exist. It's coming from second and third hand information. He brought up the Trey package, how he liked it and how they went away from it, maybe because they weren't happy with Trey. A player on the team who's no longer on the roster right now last year said that they went away from the Trey package because the veterans came to Kyle and they were like, hey, this is kind of stepping on Jimmy and we don't like it. So that's why they stopped it. So to hear all of this nonsense, just where's it coming from? Why, I guess, is the real question, because we don't hear this kind of talk when it comes to other quarterbacks, especially other younger quarterbacks who last year played and were way, way worse. You would think that they shouldn't even be starting this year. So like we said, there's not much to talk about right now. And when you hear one thing and then it just kind of snowballs into a whole other story. And that's what it feels like this is, where to me, it sounds like we need football. We need training camp to be here. So we have some tangible things to discuss and talk about, because everything that I just heard right there, it just feels like they're just pulling it out of their you-know-whats, man.
We're making shit up at this point. Yep. Let's be honest. We're making shit up. I'll say this. I mean, and I'm too far down this road on the YouTube front to not make this observation. When I do a video and I talk about the San Francisco Giants, I get a certain amount of, traction on that video, hits, views, comments, donations, etc. If I talk about the Warriors in the playoffs, I'm going to get more. I'm going to get more traction than I'm going to get when I talk about the Giants. Guess what I can talk about that gets me way, 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 way more traction than anything else? Trey freaking Lance.
Yep.
I could do a video on Trey Lance right now, not even knowing what I want to say about it, and I could get thousands of views and likes. Why? Because it's an unknown, and everybody wants to know. And he's the quarterback of the 49ers, and the 49ers are the most popular team in this market, in the most popular sport in the world, in America. I'll say in America, because I'm sure soccer and the Premiership, La Liga and all the different soccer leagues are incredibly popular. But let's just say in America, the most popular sport is the NFL. The 49ers are an iconic franchise within that most popular sport. Trey Lance is the quarterback of that iconic franchise. And then there's this controversy of, is he ready? Is he not? Is Jimmy going to be traded? Where is he going to be traded? All the drama that goes along with it. So, but I'm not naive enough to think that all of a sudden there's all these, somewhat controversial videos with like secondhand information and hearsay sources. Oh, but they all happen to involve Trey Lance.
Right.
That's how convenient. It's like what are we supposed to believe, that Skip and Shannon just luckily fall on LeBron topics every day? Or do you think, it's amazing that they always have a LeBron scoop? No, they know what drives the audience and they're feeding the beast. And that's all that I'm taking from this, is that Trey Lance gets hits, Trey Lance gets views, Trey Lance produces money, revenue. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants to do. They want to justify themselves, give themselves relevance, make money for their parent company, blah, 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 blah. So I don't believe anything on Trey Lance, good or bad, that's coming out right now, because it's not based on anything. Once somebody with a reputation in the league puts his name on it, a la Greg Cosell, a Brian Baldinger, somebody who watches film, Matt Bowen, Louis Riddick, there's a handful of people out there that I'm looking for, you're looking for as well, to give their feedback on actual, practice or game, preseason or regular season footage from Trey Lance. But this arm fatigue and whispers and he's not ready. It's just too coincidental that all these weirdo out of nowhere stories that can't be substantiated all involve a guy that I know, because I'm doing this, will get traction that other stories won't get and can't get. So I don't put any credence in it. I just think that people understand, park your car on Trey Lance Lane and just do whatever you got to do, and it will get traction and you'll make money. I think that's what that's about. I don't think any of that should be addressed on its merit. And I've never heard of quarterback arm fatigue outside of the same thing that you get in baseball, Kyle, which is like, Brandon Crawford might be at the end of spring training will say, I got a kind of a dead arm, or Giant starting pitchers at the end of March will be like, I've got kind of a little bit of a dead arm period. And they just throw through it. They build that strength, they break the adhesions, and they're better for it. I could see the same thing happening in football, but I don't think Trey has any delivery that's going to, cause extreme fatigue and this and that. I don't see it.
What gets me is none of these guys are ever held accountable.
Right.
Remember,
if you're wrong, what's the cost?
Right. Leading up to the draft, all we heard was Mac Jones to the 49ers. It's a lock. And the signs weren't pointing to Mac Jones, but all we heard was, it's going to be Mac. Don't you worry. It's going to be Mac. And then once it was Mac, nothing. All that disappeared. None of them had to say, oh, sorry, I was wrong. They just kept it moving like nothing happened. And it feels like the exact same thing here, where whenever they talk down on Trey Lance, they will reference one or two throws from last year or his completion percentage, ignoring everything else, ignoring that he didn't get a chance to practice, didn't get a chance to take control of the team leading up to those starts for multiple weeks. And that matters when you're a quarterback. But again, when Trey Lance throws for 30 touchdowns this year and the 49ers win 11 games, those critics that have been talking for the last couple months now, it's been building. It's like they're getting a train, they're rolling now on this Trey Lance talk. None of this, they're going to be ghosts. We're not going to hear about them, and they're going to either change the subject or say, hey, that was true at the time, when everything that they're saying right now is baseless. Again, they haven't played football in almost a month. Where is this coming from? Why now, too? I feel like at minicamp, from the reporters who were there, who were telling us, hey, he looks good, man. He looks really freaking good. We would have heard, because they have no problem telling us when any other player looks bad. Trey Lance, hey, he was off today. He had a bad day. None of that came out. So why now? Why like a month later are we supposed to believe that the 49ers are worried about the third overall pick? Like it doesn't make sense, and it never did, and it never will. But again, they're not going to be held accountable, so they can say whatever they want to and hope it sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, and when he comes out and plays good, I'd like to see some people try to go get receipts on some of these comments and be like, hey, you know what I mean? Because you could do an incredible. Think about that. Think about if he shows in the first month of the regular season that he's like a very good young quarterback, and you were all convinced, it's like going into week 5 or week 6. Imagine the research on the article of all the receipts on all the people who were questioning this and questioning that. I mean, I think it's going to look really overwhelming, and it's going to make some people kind of have to answer as to exactly why. Exactly why did you have this take? Because it once again, I just think that it's like, hey, let's keep talking Trey, because Trey drives ratings. Juwan Jennings is interesting to me because Kyle Shanahan came out and said that he thinks that Juwan Jennings is having the best offseason of his NFL career. And the more you watch this kid in practice, the more you love him. You can tell he's fast enough. He runs good routes. He plays with reckless abandon. He loves contact. He wants to hit people. He'll catch it in a crowd and hold on. He's got way better ball skills than you think. He's really a nice looking player. How do you see the 49ers at wide receiver this year? Because you're going to have Ayuk. I mean, last year they had a bunch of receivers. Now they got more, and they're going to use Debo. I don't want to say exclusively because I don't believe that, but a lot more as a receiver. So you have Ayuk being used more because he's now coming into his prime. Jennings the same. Debo being used more. Now you have Danny Gray. Now you have Ray McLeod, and you got other guys. I think big play Tay Martin's going to be heard from. The quickness that I saw on a thing that Brad Graham posted this week was incredible. Seeing the separation that Tay Martin can get in a short area. There's Keyshawn Johnson. There's Marcus Johnson. There's Malik Turner. There's Tayseer Mack. Kenny Pickett's guy from Pitt. How do you see the wide receiver competition going? I think it could be fierce.
Yeah, I think they're going to use training camp to work out defined roles. So, for example, Ray McLeod might be the gadget guy. Danny Gray might be the timing receiver, so they can use play action shot plays to him. He might, I guess the better way to put it is Danny Gray would be who people thought Marquise Goodwin would be, who people expected Travis Benjamin to be, the guy who, can open up and stretch the field. I imagine Brandon Ayuk, who was phenomenal in training camp last year, will keep ascending towards that wide receiver one. He just needs to find consistency. That might involve throwing him the ball a lot. Like he might need multiple targets a quarter, for example, to just get in the groove of things. And then Debo is Debo. But when it comes to Juwan Jennings, I think his role is going to be pretty defined as well. I think he's going to be the third down guy that they rely on, that, hey, if it's 3rd and 4, if it's 3rd and 5, we know we can run this route with Juwan Jennings every time, and he's going to get open and he's going to catch it. And that is a great thing to have for an offense, a reliable target who can win in contested situations. So I think that's going to be Juwan Jennings. But as far as the rest of the receivers shake out, like who knows what to expect from some of those names you mentioned, whether it's Austin Mack, whether it's Malik Turner or Tay Martin. Like Keyshawn Johnson might be a guy who, like, they do have a ton of names who could probably make an NFL roster. And what's nice is they're not relying on just Debo and Ayuk. Like these other guys who they have brought in this offseason can be guys who can make plays down the line. So I think when we're looking at box scores at the season, once the season's over, it'll be this one game, Debo caught 5 passes. The next game, Ayuk caught 6 passes. The next game, everybody had like 3 passes. I think they're going to share the wealth, and that's going to make them even more dangerous. What about you?
Well, I'm kind of wondering if you think we're going to see more 3 wides this year than ever before. I mean, and obviously you have Juszczyk and you're paying him a ton of money, and you got a can full of running backs. But do you think we'll see more 3 wides, 1 back with all the receivers they have? Because they seemingly have a very deep group of receivers. Based on what I'm looking at, I think Ayuk, Debo, Jennings for sure, Gray for sure, McLeod for sure. That's 5 right there. I think they for sure keep 6. So that means Malik Turner and Austin Mack, Marcus Johnson, Keyshawn Johnson, Tay Martin, Tayseer Mack. These guys are all competing for maybe 1 spot. What do you think? Do you think we'll get more three wide receivers?
I think that was the case when he was in Atlanta, when Kyle was in Atlanta. And maybe not so much 3 wide receivers. Maybe we could be 2 true running backs. But again, Kyle Juszczyk is essentially a running back the way that he can catch the ball in the backfield. I do think we see a lot more weapons, though. And think about it. So the reason they were in so much 21 personnel last year is because the field was condensed because they didn't use the entire field. That's not going to be an issue this year. That's not going to be the case at all. They can throw the ball not just down the field. So when I think of arm strength, I think of throwing the ball on a line 15 yards and not having to worry about a defense, tipping those passes or being able to throw those deep 15-yard comebacks, the throws outside the hashes. So with that in mind, I think we will see more slot receivers on the field than the fullbacks. So they have the talent. Why invest in a 3rd-round pick if you're not going to use him, right? Why sign Ray McLeod just for a special teamer? I don't believe that's going to be the case. For all the receivers that I've talked about, I think we're going to see a lot of shuffling on the field. And again, the way that they're constructed right now, it seems like Shanahan's planning on using more receivers.
A couple more before we call it quits. First-time Pro Bowler. Who's going to – every year there's somebody who kind of makes that breakthrough. 49ers added a lot on special teams. Will it come on special teams? Is it somebody we're not thinking of? Man, I thought Jimmy Ward and Talanoa Hufanga both looked outstanding in the mini camp, but it's mini camp and there's a lot of good safeties in the NFL for sure. What do you think? Who's the Niners' first-time Pro Bowler this year? Do they get one?
I think it has to be on defense, just for all the reasons we just said. I think on offense, there's going to be so much change from week to week that it's going to be hard to nail down, unless like Brandon Ayuk catches 10 touchdowns or something crazy like that. It'll be hard to nail down. But I'm going to go with a guy that I've been riding all offseason, and I just think Azeez Al-Shaair has potential to be a star. And if he does end up starting, and if he does end up playing a full season, and if he just builds on what he did last year, I think the 49ers might mess around and have 2 linebackers in the Pro Bowl. I think that he is that good, and they will be the best duo, the linebacking duo in the NFL. So I'm going to go Azeez Al-Shaair because he's a playmaker, and by getting your hands on passes and just making plays at the line of scrimmage, that's how you get recognized in the NFL. That's where I'm going. What about you?
Well, I mean, I hate to copy you because that's,
don't do it.
Bad YouTube, but I love Al-Shaair as well. And believe me, from being at the mini camp, he was not on the field with the team. He was working on the side, but man, the look on his face of just focus and determination as he's working out on his own with no helmet, on the side with a coach. Anybody's been to NFL practices, there are norms to this stuff, and you get to see the patterns. And generally, when you got a player who's hurt working with coaches, he doesn't have a game face on at all. He may even not. He may have headsets on. He may have earphones in. He may be listening to music. He may be zoning out. This guy had this look on his face, like I will rehab this injury. I will get back on the field. I mean, the determination on his face was incredible to watch when you're just saying, it's mini camp on the side with the strength and conditioning assistant. He was bringing some intensity. So I like that one too. I'll go sleeper pick here. And I'm going to go with out on the offense. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think if they, I loved, and you're going to laugh at this one because it's so far out of left field, but Jordan Matthews as a movement tight end has real potential this year to make serious plays. Why? Because Ayuk and Debo and Jennings and all these receivers we're talking about, that's who the defensive coordinator is going to be talking to his team about. It's Ayuk. It's Debo. Oh, don't forget about Jennings. Hey, they got deep speed and Danny Gray. Hey, Ray McLeod's dangerous. Don't forget about George Kittle. Let's not forget about these running backs. Guess who they are forgetting about? The two tight end set with the movement tight end and Jordan Matthews. I'll make the prediction. I think Jordan Matthews beats out Ross Dwelley. He's put on at least 10 to 15 pounds of good muscle. He was moving down the field like a receiver. I mean, if that's your movement tight end, that he's moving incredibly fast for a tight end. And I realize he's kind of borderline even in the NFL, right? He's like on the edge of not being in the league. But the work that he's done on adding good weight, sometimes that's not a 1 year deal. Sometimes it's a multiple year deal. He's now looks natural at about 235, 238, somewhere in that range, and he is moving. So he always had pretty good ball skills. I'll say he makes the team as a movement tight end. They wind up going to tight ends a lot, and Jordan Matthews has a big impact this year. That'd be my guess.
That is the hottest of hot takes. We should get you on Cowherd for that one.
If that happens, seriously, I got to get the Niner Nation special designation of the week or something. Because I mean, that's a heat check, man. That's Clay from the top of the circle. You know, I mean, that's
Game 6 Clay right there.
Yeah, that's a heat check.
So I don't think he makes the roster, but that's an interesting point when you
gotta
say
see him though. He looks so much different than a year ago.
Right. So last year was the first time he was playing at that weight. And now he's had a year to get used to running and blocking and just playing football. I imagine he's just a lot more comfortable. That's going to be interesting. I like Charlie Warner quite a bit, and I think it's going to be tough to keep him off the field. And I imagine in year 3, he's only going to get more comfortable and just better as a receiver too. So I'm a big Warner fan.
Yeah, I like him too. He's a real, he's a tenacious, like pit bull type blocker.
Great blocker.
Yeah, and he just won't let go. He just will not let go. But the thing about Matthews that's interesting, they list him at 6'3", 236. He's in the prime years of his career. He's 29. So this is like this. I know people look at him and go, well, where is he in his career? Well, he kind of had a struggle to make it because he hasn't been able to really separate at the NFL level from NFL caliber corners. So now he made the move 2 years ago to like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to try to be a receiver anymore. I'm going to try to be a movement tight end. But he was still 218. And then I'm sure he lifted like crazy, but he didn't actually add the weight. Now you look at him and you're like, whoa. He's 238, and he's still moving very much like he moved when he was a 218-pound wide receiver. So that's a deep sleeper, but that's my guess. Couple last ones before we let you go. CBS Sports had the 49ers offensive roster rated as the 19th most talented team in the NFL. Where are you on this 49er roster as far as how you think it compares? I know we haven't done a deep dive studying every roster, and it's a process, but you're pretty aware of this league, Kyle, throughout now that we've seen the draft and the mini camps. Where do you think you would put the Niners and what they're bringing on paper to camp? Where would that rank in your mind, just if you're just thinking it over compared to the rest of the league?
I think the unknown at quarterback is really throwing a lot of people off because if you just look at what the 49ers were, even last year, with Jimmy Garoppolo and at quarterback, who people have a lot of questions about, they were essentially top 8 in every metric that matters. EPA per play, drop half per play, rushing EPA, third down conversion over expected, red zone touchdowns, yards per play, explosive play rate. Like everything you're going down the list, you're thinking, wow, these guys are really freaking good. And now, because of a change at quarterback, they think there's going to be that much of a drop off. That's saying something. So best tight end, probably George Kittle, right? Best left tackle, Trent Williams. We just mentioned an all-pro in Deebo Samuel. We have an up-and-coming receiver in Brandon Ayuk, and then a slew of running backs. So one of those guys are going to be very productive this year. I think it's going to be TDP. And then the icing on the cake is just Trey Lance. And if he is going to be able to take this ceiling of the offense. So the 49ers had a low ceiling on offense last year because they weren't able to use the entire field. Defenses condensed the middle of the field, and it was really hard to move the ball. But still, because Shanahan is a wizard, they were able to move the ball. It's going to be so much more difficult for defenses to kind of clue in on who to stop this year. That's why I think, at worst, probably 6, 7, just because other teams don't have the luxury of a Deebo Samuel and a Brandon Ayuk and a George Kittle. Like most teams have one guy to go to, not 3. So, 19th is essentially just you're admitting that you just don't watch a lot of football, or you're basically telling us that you don't believe that Lance is going to be a starting caliber quarterback, which I would strongly disagree with.
Yeah, I just think that, if you're ranking them 19th, you don't know personnel. I would say they're a top 5 team in talent for sure. Why? They're stacked at wide receiver. They're stacked at running back. They have a lot of bodies on the offensive line and a phenomenal left tackle. Then on the defense, you've got maybe the deepest defensive line in football. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but they're exceptionally deep. And then you look at linebacker, exceptionally deep at linebacker, exceptionally deep at corner. They're really only relatively thin at the safety spot on defense. Otherwise, they're really fortified on defense. They've got a number of really top tier specialists on special teams, and they're really, really loaded at wide receiver and running back. So, yeah, the quarterback thing I think is a big part of that equation. Maybe teams or people view the talent differently because they are kind of an unknown at quarterback. But I think they're far more talented than teams than at least CBS believes. Last one. Let's finish with the NFC West. I saw the over-unders are all out. Seattle is the over-under number is 6. The Niners is 10. It's that to me is interesting. The Arizona Cardinals number was interesting too. Let me see if I can find it here. Cardinals had an interesting number. I like the Cardinals under this year. It was 9, and the under was favored. How do you see the division this year? The Cardinals aren't going to have DeAndre Hopkins at the beginning of the year. Right. There's all this unknown going on with Kyler, and they've gotten off to fast starts. I think their roster is not quite as good. They've got some age on defense with J.J. Watt. I think the Cardinals are going to be worse than people think compared to the public, what the public thinks. I think Seattle's going to be better than what people think. I just think they're going to win 6 or 7 games and they'll go over. And I think the Rams will have a little bit of that Super Bowl hangover. I think this is going to be a very good year for the 49ers in the division, in that I think all 3 of the teams opposite them in this division may struggle at times. I think the 49ers, it looks really good the way they match up inside the division. How do you see the division?
Yeah, I think this division sets up well for Trey Lance in year 1 as a starter. And just taking it back real quick to the way that we're talking about the rest of the roster, I feel like some of the experts are overrating the loss of Alex Mack and Laken Tomlinson because of Lance. A good quarterback can hide a shaky offensive line. And that's not to say Aaron Banks, Daniel Brunskill, whoever's starting in front of him will be shaky. I just think he's going to be able to run out of sacks. He's going to be able to make plays where you don't even notice the deficiencies of the offensive line. But I do agree that Seattle is going to be better than people think. And maybe that's just because the expectations are so low. I think they're going to be solid on defense. And I actually think Geno Smith, if he does start, he'll be fine. And that's all you need to be for, with their expectations where they are. I can see 6 or 7 games. I just don't see Arizona coming close to 9 wins. Think about it. Every year, the way that they start, they just flail out. It's so consistent with how they play. And that's by force feeding the ball to DeAndre Hopkins. That's with J.J. Watt being an all-pro, all-everything for the first half of the season before he gets hurt. These are things that happen every year. So to pretend that it's not going to happen this time around now they don't have Chandler Jones with a shaky secondary. Good luck with that, Cardinal fans. And then the Rams, they lost Andrew Whitworth, their left tackle. They lost a couple of key starters who might not be big names, but were kind of glue guys for them. So I think the 49ers are going to be right there. I think both the Rams and 49ers, it's going to be – I think whoever wins 11 games, with the first to 11 will win the division. I think both teams are probably going to come in right around 10 or 11 games, though.
Last one. Let's finish with some Trey Lance over-unders. I think this is interesting. The Vegas numbers are out on Trey Lance's individual stats. They have set the over-under on Trey Lance touchdown passes this upcoming year at 23.5. You going over or you going under?
Interesting. So Jimmy threw 27 in 2019. He threw 20 or 21 last year, but he went a couple games where he didn't throw any. And he also had, most of the games where it was just one. So if we think that he's going to have a breakout type of game where he has 3 here and there, then he should be able to get that over pretty easily. I will go over just because I think that Shanahan is going to do what most good offensive coordinators do and pad the quarterback stats once they get to the red zone. So I'll go over there. What about you?
Yeah, I like it over. I don't like it over by a ton. I think that's a really good number, 23.5.
Is probably what I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking 25 touchdowns. The interception over under is where I'm kind of torn. It's 11.5 INTs for Trey.
Over.
You going over?
That sounds like, that seems like a lot, but it's really not. And again, I think Jimmy was 13 and 12 in both of the years that he stayed healthy. And then with that in mind, you have to think rookies in general, they turn the ball over. They look at Trevor Lawrence last year, he threw 17. Essentially all the rookie quarterbacks threw more interceptions than touchdowns. And we might have to, there's going to be a game, maybe multiple games, where he throws 2 or more interceptions. I think Jimmy in 2019 and 2021 combined had 7 multiple interception games. So if Vet's doing that, it's not going to be a surprise to see a first-year starting quarterback do that. So I'm going to go over there.
I'm going to go under. I think Trey, he takes care of the football. I don't think he repeats his mistakes. I think there's a chance, Kyle, that he's on somewhat of a pitch count. They're going to have so many good runners this year and so many great run after the catch guys that I don't see them taking tons of chances down the field. I think they'll have them on a pitch count, protect the football. I could see 25 and 8. I think I could see 25 and 8. Those are the numbers I look at. And then over under on rushing touchdowns for Trey. The number is 4.5.
Yeah, he might get that in the first half of the season.
Yeah,
I think he's going to run for he's going to be knocking on the door for double-digit rushing touchdowns. And so I think there were only 3 quarterbacks last year who had more than 6 rushing touchdowns. It was Jalen Hurts, Lamar, and Josh Allen. And then after that, everybody else fell off a cliff. But I just think, again, you remember the 2-point conversion play with the Packers where he's just one-on-one isolated against the linebacker, and the linebacker has no chance. And even the fourth and goal against the Cardinals where he got shut down, if they do that play 10 times over 10 times, he's going to score pretty much every time against Isaiah Simmons. So I think we're going to see a lot of those high leverage situations near the goal line for Lance to be able to run it. And I'm taking him at his size with his athleticism every time. So I think he's going to reach that number pretty easily.
Yeah, I think I like that to be 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And you know why? Because I think one of the best, if you're saying how do you stress out a defense, you have Danny Gray on a jet sweep, going to the left, and you have Trey, a right-handed quarterback, holding that mesh point and then sprinting out to the right. And I just think that could be a staple of their goal line look, because we think about
wrong.
What's that?
One false step and you're wrong, with those guys back there.
Exactly. And they're going to hand it to Gray sometimes, and you're going to have to honor that speed, and it's going to create all kinds of space. It's going to create a moment of indecision, and then that moment of indecision with the ability to maybe move 2 or 3 steps and then unleash that rocket. I think he's going to be good in the red zone. And I also think there's a chance that he's going to wind up, running, more than a few of those in. So that, and then I could see him going in 5 times almost untouched. You know what I mean? I can see that kind of goal line threat.
I was going to bring up 2nd and goal from the 6-yard line. It's spread out, not a designed run, but because think about all the crossing routes that they normally do. Linebackers turn their head chasing. somebody forgets to take the quarterback, and then he just waltzes in untouched. I think that's going to be a pretty prominent part of their offense.
And then this one, regular season rushing yards for Trey. Where do you think, before I give you the number, why don't you guess? What do you think the number is? He ran for, was it 1,100 yards at North Dakota State?
Yeah, it was up there. I would guess 400, 450.
It's 549 and a half.
Holy smokes. So they think he's going to rush for a ton of yards.
See, I don't see him like that, man. I really don't. I don't see Lamar. I see, I see Mahomes. I see a little bit more, a little bit bigger, a little bit faster version of Mahomes. I don't see Lamar at all.
So last year when he would break the pocket, he would like begrudgingly run. He did not want to run. And I think that's just who Lance is. That's who Lance has always been. And landing with Shanahan is the best fit for him, obviously. But I'm going to go under there. 549. That is a lot. And my comparison has been Donovan McNabb for him, who did rush for 600 yards as a rookie. But last year, only 3 quarterbacks ran for over 400 yards or 450 yards last year. And that usually those guys are running a ton. And again, I do think we will see Lance run a lot when the play is not designed, but I don't. 549 means he's taken off quite a bit. I'm going to go under there.
Yeah, I think 549 is a number that says there's going to be lots and lots of designed runs, and I don't see that. I see lots of scrambles, but I don't see as many designed runs. Last one on the over/under train on Trey, passing yards. They have it at 3499 and a half, so roughly 3,500 passing yards. Are you going over or under?
I would pound that over. I would take that bet today, tomorrow, yesterday.
Wow. 30, you're that confident.
35?
3,500. Right? Yep.
So Taylor Heineke threw for 3,400 last year, with essentially next to nothing as a supporting cast. 3,500 is in the same level as Carson Wentz. Trevor Lawrence threw for 3,600 last year. I think there's going to be more variance to the offense this year, but I also think those shot plays that they usually draw up, I think they're going to hit on a lot of those this year as well. So while there might not be the same type of efficiency numbers, I think his total volume stats will be higher. So yeah, I would feel comfortable about taking that over, and that's lower than what I would expect. Because think about it, Jimmy, without even starting, I think even the games that missing 2 starts last year, I think he still threw for 3,800 yards. So there's so much space and open wide receivers in this offense. We've got to think about this is a Shanahan offense who just naturally produces open wide receivers. He's going to have a chance to rack up some numbers for sure.
There's a chance that Trey could be, that he could be looking at prolific numbers. I mean, look what Matt Ryan did in his second year in Kyle's offense, and now look at the weapons that they've surrounded Lance with. If the line is worth a damn at all this year, he's surrounded by a bevy of weapons. I mean, really, it's people are going to point this. Oh, Trey first year. It's hardly all on Trey. He's got a nice surround. He's probably he's probably better supported than any second year quarterback in the entire league.
There's no doubt about it. Which is why I would have not faulted the 49ers for starting him last year, because again, they were stacked last year and they're even more stacked this year. And I think he's probably in a better position just because he's sad and got to learn to see the ropes, just how to play quarterback from afar in the NFL. But they have speed, they have big guys who can catch over the middle, they have reliable receivers, and they have a running game. And they have Kyle freaking Shanahan calling the plays, which essentially guarantees you 2 open shots down the field a game. We've seen that every year, every game. So I might go bet that.
916_49er says, my first time hearing Kyle Posey from Niners Nation. Respect, bro. And 916_49er chimes back in with Kyle's going to have a lot of fun with his new favorite toy, Trey Lance. All right. Yeah. I mean, if you're just stumbling onto this, Kyle and I have been doing this for a number of weeks now, every Thursday at 3:00, Niners Nation style on the Krueg Show channel here. Check out Niners Nation. And if they went there right now, ninersnation.com on the web, what's up right now? And what are you working on? I know you're always working on something for the future. Can you tease it at all?
I want to focus on D'Amico Ryans moving forward, just because it's year 2 and there hasn't been a lot of talk about him. And, Trey Lance, Kyle Shanahan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Deebo Samuel. There's a lot going on the offensive side of the ball, but I want to give some credit to D'Amico Ryans. I want to start, digging into some of the things that he did well last year, despite having incompetent cornerbacks. I don't feel like he gets enough credit for how well the defense played last year by having Josh freaking Norman at quarterback, man. That's very difficult to win with. So because of that, I think I'm gonna lean into D'Amico next week.
That's a great one. If you think about it, if we just went down and just quickly peruse the defensive roster, and then you said, if you asked one question, let's talk about defensive players who last year improved as the year went on. Jordan Willis, Charles Omenihu, Samson Ebukam, Dre Greenlaw got healthy. Azeez Al-Shaair was playing better late. Heck, we saw Curtis Robinson, I thought, improve dramatically. Then you're in the secondary. They had some injuries, but you saw Ambry Thomas, Talanoa Hufanga. We saw a number of the younger defensive players make strides in season. That's a little feather in the cap for D'Amico right there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Ebukam is going to take a step forward. I think he's going to. So he started out slow, but he was transferred, or he played linebacker, and then he was playing full-time edge rusher. So he was always going to start out slow. And then towards the second half of the season, you're like, oh, this is what this guy can do. Like he essentially morphed into a dominant run defender that kind of figured out how to rush the passer. And I think in year 2 he's going to blow up. So I don't know if Drake Jackson's going to be able to get a start, right away with
seriously
Ebukam played. So I'm looking forward to him.
Yeah, Drake Jackson. Hey, Drake, if you show up in camp and you ain't ready to go, guess what? The one thing they do have on the defensive end, they need you. But they got guys. I mean, Jordan Willis is a guy, and they got other guys there who are going to fire. Barrett is a pretty decent pass rusher. I mean, guys who aren't even slated to make this team have talent. So it's going to be a competitive spot, another competitive spot this summer in Santa Clara for sure. All right, great stuff. The fastest hour, man. We've gone for an hour and 2 minutes. This is every time we sit down, man, and talk Niners, it is the fastest hour. I always say, yeah, we're going to keep it to 30 minutes, and then we just blow past by 30 minutes. So, Kyle, great stuff.
Starts, man.
Oh, I know. Seriously, we have to do a 2-hour deal. It's going to go on and on and on. But great stuff. We'll talk to you next week, and have a phenomenal weekend and onward and upward. We're 19 days until training camp. I was saying to Ryan Smith, it's the calm before the storm, because it's going to be fast and furious come late July.
Can't wait, man. Looking forward to it. Enjoy your weekend too, man.
Take care.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Careful, whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah. We ain't never fall back. Hold our ground.